James Carter hadn't come to this place seeking peace, at least not the kind people usually meant by the word. He wasn't escaping a troubled past, nor was he chasing some grand reinvention or emotional healing. What he craved was distance, from people, from noise, from the burden of expectations he'd never agreed to carry. The property, a dense, wooded lot perched just beyond the town's legal boundary, offered exactly that kind of solitude. It had belonged to his brother, Michael, before him, though Michael never explained why he bought it or what drove him to live so far from anything resembling civilization. Now it was James's, inherited along with a house that felt eerily quiet and a history that hinted at buried secrets. The land was private, fenced off, zoned correctly, and excluded from the local homeowners association by a thin stroke of legal fortune Michael had insisted on when he finalized the deed. It wasn't much, but that boundary mattered. It ran right up to his mailbox. On the other side lay a starkly different world. Tidy lawns, strict rules, friendly patrols. James had no use for that. For 11 years he'd worked at the county coroner's office, more at ease with the dead than with potlucks, more fluent in autopsy reports than chit-chat. He wasn't damaged, just exact. His life revolved around procedure, his mind tuned to facts. Death didn't deceive, people did. That's why he preferred things that didn't shift under scrutiny. The house itself was modest. 2 stories, worn shingles, a porch that groaned under his weight like it was exhaling. But it was honest, sturdy, a place that didn't try to be more than it was. Since moving in, James had been sifting through Michael's belongings, stacks of documents, shelves of field notes, a drawer of unopened letters he couldn't yet face. Michael's life here felt strangely detached, as if he'd always known he'd leave it behind long before the house began to decay. Maybe he had. James didn't question it when the Will Aravet just packed up his city apartment, quit his job, and left. He liked the rustle of wind through the trees, the crunch of gravel under his boots as he patrolled the property's edge. He liked locking up at night and tidying the shed for no reason other than he could. For a few weeks it was calm, not joyful, but not oppressive either. The solitude felt pure, manageable. Then Margaret appeared. It was the second Sunday in March. James was clearing brush near the fence when a voice called out from the road. A woman, maybe in her 60s, impeccably dressed, pale green sweater, hair pinned tight, waved like they were old acquaintances. They weren't. "Hi there. You must be James," she said, her smile polished but hollow. James set down his shears, wiped his hands, and gave a wary nod. "I'm Margaret, the community lead for Pinewood Estates." She gestured toward the neat rows of houses sharing his fence line. "Just wanted to officially welcome you. I was pretty close with your brother." James raised an eyebrow. Michael had never mentioned her, but he nodded anyway, waiting for the INEVY table casserole or flyer. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes sweeping the property like she was taking stock. "Lovely land you've got here. Rare to have so much independence these days." The way she said it turned the word into a flaw. Michael liked his space too, I suppose. We tried to bring him in, you know. Guess he wasn't the community type. Her smile tightened and she added, "We've got some basic ground rules around here. Even if you're just outside our circle, we all like to keep up a certain standard. It's about unity, not control." He gave her a neutral nod, enough to close the conversation. Margaret seemed content for the moment. "Well, welcome again," she chirped, then walked off, her heels clicking on the gravel like breaking twigs. James watched her leave, unsettled by how she'd spoken of Michael and framed standards like they had claws. The next morning, a wooden stake appeared near his property line. James spotted it while watering the shrubs. No note, no marker, just a pine sliver jabbed into the dirt. He yanked it out, tossed it in the shed, and thought little of it. 2 days later, another showed up. Then a third. He started photographing them, dating each one not out of fear but habit. Something was wrong, and the pattern wasn't random. The real shift came with an orange notice nailed to his fence. Environmental Activity Tie Zone, visual monitoring in effect. No agency logo, no contact, just a vague assertion he was being watched. James called the county, no record of any inspection. The environmental office said the same. A friend at the sheriff's office paused when James gave the address. "That place? You're not on the association's roster, but they've had trouble over there," the deputy muttered. Margaret returned that weekend, clipboard in hand, clutching a pamphlet titled Community Harmony Through Shared Duty. She asked if he'd reconsider joining. He said no. She mentioned neighbors' worries about wildlife near his land. He said deer weren't a problem. Her smile turned patronizing. Sometimes it's not the animals, James. Sometimes it's who draws them in. That night, something rattled his back gate. Nothing was there when he checked, but by morning, scuff marks marred the latch, and a scrap of synthetic fabric hung on the hinges, not his, too high for an animal. He didn't call the cops yet. It wasn't enough, not the stakes, not the notice, not the veiled jab. But pressure was mounting, and James sensed this wasn't about deer or rules. It was about power, about bending him. He'd misjudged people before, underestimated their need to dominate. He wouldn't again. By the 5th morning of his 3rd week, the air felt different, taut, expectant. Stepping outside, he saw a cruiser idling beyond his gate. The officer, a lanky man in his 30s, held a notepad like he'd already filled it out. Mr. Carter. James nodded. Got a call this morning. Anonymous tip says you've been firing weapons near the residential line. Maybe hunting, maybe illegal. His tone was flat, but the implication was sharp. James gestured toward the property. Take a look. The officer poked around, checked the shed. No guns, no blood, just tools and deer tracks. After 20 minutes, he shut his notepad. Nothing here. But people around here get twitchy. One sound, one shadow, expect more of this. James said nothing, watching the dust trail the cruiser left behind. Later, he found 2 sets of boot prints in the brush, flat soles, not his. That evening, he hid a second trail cam in the trees, covering a blind spot. The next morning, a knotted paper bag sat at his doorstep. Inside, bloody feathers, maybe chicken, no note. He burned it whole. On Wednesday, another cruiser, another officer, another anonymous call, this time about a tall man in a black jacket with a crossbow. James didn't own one. Caller's name, he asked. Anonymous, came the reply. He didn't push. That afternoon, a sign appeared near his drive, Protected Wildlife Survey Area, entry prohibited. No agency, just a deer silhouette on laminated paper. He pulled it out, spotting faint initials carved at the base, MS. Margaret Simmons. She wasn't subtle anymore. James confirmed with the wildlife office survey scheduled. He got a notarized letter proving it. Returning home, his gate was unlatched, net forced, just opened. The camera showed nothing. Someone knew the gaps or jammed the signal. That night, a glint caught his eye outside the kitchen window. A blunt hunting dart lodged in a tree beyond the fence, meant to be seen. He didn't report it, just documented it. The next morning, a package arrived. Cheap binoculars and a camo walkie-talkie with a dead transmitter inside. Someone had been listening. He smashed and buried them. Then he called a property harassment lawyer and a security consultant. They're not just watching, he told the consultant. They're staging something. The consultant agreed. Fake police calls, planted items, and environmental claims theory, crafting a profile. If you react, you're the unstable one. James asked what had happened if Margaret called crying, claiming fear. She calls first, you're cuffed before you can talk, the man said. That night, James sat on the porch with a legal pad, logging every detail: times, dates, names, weather, what he found, what he heard. The next day, his mailbox overflowed with wet, shredded Paperno markings, stuffed by hand. Across the street, Margaret walked her little white dog, waving like nothing was wrong. She wasn't just provoking him, she was setting a trap, and if he didn't stay sharp, she'd twist him into the VY lane she needed.